Now Brexit does bite. Unilever, manufacturer of many of the products we consume every day, told retailers it must put up its prices. Tesco refused to pay. Today, Unilever pulled its products, and tonight some are already disappearing from Tesco's website. So are these the kind of price hikes we're going to see in the shops? Our business editor Joel Hills and political editor Robert Peston will be here to assess. Also on News at 10.
Should MPs have the final say, Prime Minister?
Give us a vote. Mrs May, MPs demand a say before Article 50 is triggered and we leave the EU. Is it all over? Trump unleashed looks like it will result in Hillary in the White House. And never give up, the horse no one wanted to buy and how it turned into a winner.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. The warnings have been there for a while. The experts, in so much as we're still allowed to listen to them, did say that Brexit would force down the pound, which would in turn push up the cost of imports and thus, in the end, prices. Now it seems it's happening, and two of the biggest household names in the consumer business, Tesco and Unilever, have gone to war over who should pay the extra. Unilever makes, amongst many other things, PG Tips, Persil and Pot Noodles, Hellmann's and Coleman's, Marmite and Bovril. As we understand it, Unilever is demanding that Tesco pay it 10% more for its products. Tesco is simply refusing. Hence, some of those brands are actually disappearing from Tesco's website tonight. And whilst it's true that a shortage of Marmite doesn't necessarily qualify as a national crisis, it may be an ugly portent of things to come.
Unilever boasts its brands are in almost every home in Britain, but that will change if its bust up with Britain's largest supermarket rolls on. Already tonight, Marmite, Persil, Flora, Hellmann's, Coleman's and Pot Noodle are no longer available on Tesco's website. Unilever wanted to hike its prices by 10%. The supermarket's refusing to pay them. A week ago, Tesco's chief executive, who used to work at Unilever, told me he would resist rising costs caused by the slump in the pound.
What I'm saying is, since the referendum, we have not increased prices. Since the referendum, actually our prices have continued to go down. I can't tell you what the exchange rate will do to the supply base going forward. It depends on the level. What I can give you a commitment is, it's not our intention to let prices flow through to retail inflation if it's at all avoidable.
So the pledge, to be clear, is we will keep prices down if we can.
Correct. Yeah.
Tonight, in a statement, Tesco said, we are currently experiencing availability issues on a number of Unilever products. We hope to have this issue resolved soon. ITV News understands that Unilever's attempting to raise prices at all the major supermarkets and that, like Tesco, Morrison's, Asda and Sainsbury's, are resisting. Around half of everything our big supermarkets sell is imported, so the fall in the pound creates a headache. Suppliers want to pass on their rising costs. Supermarkets, though, want to keep prices as low as possible and protect their profits.
I think there's a very broad expectation from retailers within the UK that prices will start increasing. We will see an end to deflation and prices will start creeping up. By how much really depends on, obviously, the variation in the value of sterling, also how much suppliers are willing to take on board in the form of lower margins.
Common sense suggests this dispute will be resolved quickly. Unilever may not get the price rise it wants, but the direction of travel is clear.
Joel Hills reporting there. Now, when more than 17 million people voted to leave the European Union back in June, the result was clear enough. What was much less clear, as we've often discussed on this programme, is exactly what form that exit should take. So who should decide? Well, today, many MPs argue Parliament should, but the government said no thanks very much. Revealing the detail would undermine its tactics, it said. And just to illustrate how much the value of the pound is tied to every dot and comma of the Brexit debate, take a look at this. The pound actually shot up between 8:30 and 9 this morning as the news broke that there would be a Commons debate on whether MPs would get a vote on the final terms. But look what happened during the debate itself. At about 1:30, Brexit Minister David Davis said Parliament would not have the power to veto the deal, and down the pound went again. Our political editor, Robert Peston, listened to the debate.
Should MPs have the final say, Prime Minister?
So she's upset loads of MPs by saying they won't get a vote on the economic relationship we'd like to have with the EU after we leave, because she can surely be trusted to know best. Though she did give us a clue what that best may be.
We're not asking ourselves what bits of membership we want to retain. We're saying what is the right relationship for the UK to have to the maximum benefit of our economy and citizens of this country.
Which is widely seen as meaning we'll be out of the single market in which all European companies are on a level playing field.
Is the Prime Minister really willing to risk a shambolic Tory Brexit just to appease the people behind her?
But if appeasement was her aim, it didn't seem to work, because in a debate 20 minutes later, Tory MP after Tory MP, or at least those who didn't want us to leave the EU, lined up to embarrass the Prime Minister.
Many people in the country don't think that there is a policy to put the national interest first. They think there is a policy to put people's narrow ideological interests first.
The pound has devalued to an extent which would have caused a political crisis 30 years ago.
What I am not prepared to do, and I say this with emphasis, is to have options closed down by diktat.
Those who are asking questions about the scrutiny by this Parliament of these fundamental negotiations are not trying to thwart the will of the people. I resent that implication. I resent it from ministers, and I resent it from the briefers and spinners from the centre of this government.
Now, the puzzle of what Brexit means hasn't been resolved, but Theresa May has 2, possibly 3 non-negotiable aims that make getting full access to the EU single market that much harder. They're an end to other EU citizens' right to live and work here, known as free movement of labour, an end to the European Court of Justice's jurisdiction here, and probably no more contributions to the EU budget. But more of what she wants won't be revealed, says their Brexit minister.
If you tell your negotiator, your opposite number in negotiation, exactly what your priorities are, exactly what your top priority is, then it will make that top priority extremely expensive.
All of which means that for us and those who work here, the important detail of what Brexit means will remain shrouded in darkness.
And as you can see, Joel and Robert are here with me now to discuss the various aspects of this. Joel, let's just talk about Tesco. What really leapt out at me quite obviously is that Unilever, we're talking about a 10% hike. Now, is that frankly in the end going to come through to consumers across the board in shops, do you think?
Well, Tesco's are making it clear that Unilever's not going to get anything like that. But I mean, it's very clear that prices are going to rise, and really quite broadly. If you look at what's happened since the value of the pound fell so sharply, I think it's clear that that there's a period that we've had for the last 3 years of falling. We've benefited as supermarkets have sort of fought hand over fist to try and hold on to their customers, partly because of the rivalry and the competition we've seen from Aldi and Lidl, perfectly healthy stuff. But, I mean, that period seems to be coming to an end. We are going to be seeing this upward pressure on supermarkets, given that so much of what they stock is actually imported. I think what's interesting about this dispute is there's always a tension between suppliers and supermarkets. This one has spilled over on the eve, funny enough, of Unilever's trading update, but in a way that is really quite rancorous. And you've seen the other supermarkets cluster. Unilever is clearly upset quite a lot of the bigger players through this.
Robert, let's move to you. Let's hard to get over watching the reversal of things in the Commons. For years, the rebels were Eurosceptics. Now they're all Remainers. Right. Do you think Theresa May will, in the end, have to concede a vote?
I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, first of all, we've just heard David Davies say that if they reveal too much of their negotiating hand, they fear they'll be stuffed by Brussels and other European governments. Second, as we've seen, there are vast numbers of MPs who don't like what they think that Theresa May is going to go for, which is a rather complicated deal that may get us some access to the single market, but less than many MPs want. But finally, let's be absolutely clear, as of now, government doesn't really know what it actually wants and thinks is achievable. And you can't have a vote on a non-existent policy.
OK, well, we will see. Should be very interesting. Now, who knows yet whether peace talks involving America and Russia on the never-ending war in Syria, scheduled for this Saturday, will amount to anything. On past form, probably not. And remarks by President Putin may not have helped. He blamed the United States for the situation that has developed in Syria. But the desperate need for an end to the fighting was made crystal clear again today in pictures and, for that matter, in statistics. Syria's civil defence workers, known as the White Helmets, say there were at least 25 airstrikes on Aleppo today. They also put the number killed at 25. And I should just warn you that some of the pictures in Raghi Omar's report are distressing indeed to watch.
Despite the global outcry and horror, nothing, it seems, can stop the unrelenting Syrian government's and Russian assault on eastern Aleppo, as today more children were pulled from the rubble of bombed buildings. The market area of Firdous, where the hungry and besieged residents come to buy whatever meagre goods they can find, was the latest major area to be hit in airstrikes. And again today, the cruel and very calculated targeting of civilian rescuers in a method euphemistically described as the double tap. An initial bomb, the rescuers go to help, and then they too are targeted. The wounded are brought into the last remaining hospitals. Hamza said he was out playing when a shell exploded, killing his younger brother and badly wounding him. These are everyday stories from eastern Aleppo, where Russian and government airstrikes leave no one, however young, untouched. Russia has been repeatedly accused of targeting Aleppo's hospitals, something that would be a war crime. Moscow has rejected it. But today, President Putin remained defiant and unyielding.
No one has talked to us or discussed anything with us. They're just trying to whip up anti-Russian hysteria around the world.
He's prepared to keep diplomatic channels open, though. Russia's foreign minister is due to meet Secretary of State John Kerry on Saturday. But today, this doctor, one of the last to remain in Aleppo, has taken a case against Russia to the European Court of Justice, accusing it of targeting the hospital that he works in and in which he continues to treat patients injured in the bombings. It's highly unlikely Russia will take much notice of any cases brought against it by doctors in Aleppo. But as the rest of the world continues to talk and Western parliaments hold debates, such desperate and some would say futile actions is all the people of Aleppo can do in the midst of their suffering. Raghi Omar, News at 10.
Now to the jailing of a murderer for a killing that was as inexplicable as it was savage. Even the judge at the High Court in Glasgow today said she could not understand it. John Leatham, who owned a delicatessen, stabbed Paige Doherty, a 15-year-old customer, to death. She had more than 140 wounds and cuts to her body. Leatham was sentenced to at least 27 years in jail. Anti-slavery campaigners acknowledge that it is sometimes difficult to engage people in the gravity of the issue they're addressing. It's occasionally confused with illegal immigration or even historic race-based slavery. But if you doubt what a blight it is on humanity, consider the words of one victim this week who said she was trafficked out of Romania with a gun to her head and then forced to sell herself to 30 clients every day and another 20 every night. Last year's Modern Slavery Act in England and Wales was hailed as a breakthrough designed to target the criminals who ply this vile trade. It has the support of both leading churches here and, forcefully, of the Prime Minister. But more than a year on, the first anti-slavery commissioner says it's not working as well as it should. He lays the blame for that with certain police forces for letting the modern slave traders get away with it.
A government video helping people to spot the signs of slavery. It isn't something from the history books or that happens abroad. It's everywhere in modern Britain. Crystal was held captive in Hertfordshire by a Nigerian family, bought for £700. She worked 18-hour days, slept on the kitchen floor, and she wasn't allowed to leave the house alone.
I'm not allowed to speak even to the mailman, to anyone. I'm not to answer the door. And it's scary. You then feel worthless. You walk, but like you're not there. You get up and you just pray and you think, is this the day the police would probably come and rescue me, someone would rescue me? And it's just sad. How can someone look at me, a grown woman, and tell me you bought me?
The Commissioner warns that there are as many as 13,000 victims of modern slavery in the UK today. In 12 months to April, over 3,000 potential victims had been referred to the Modern Slavery Unit at the National Crime Agency. 884 of these cases have been recorded, but of them, only 117 end up with successful convictions. Most of their perpetrators are going unprosecuted. Today, the Anti-Slavery Commissioner criticises the police.
Well, I think there's a lack of understanding and acceptance that this is serious and organised crime. There is a mix sometimes with immigration, and this is seen as an immigration issue when it's not, because if we don't actually respond and pursue those who commit these crimes, the criminals are operating with impunity.
One charity worker explains the poor police performance.
It's very hard for the police to do their job when victims aren't properly supported. In order to get a criminal conviction, you clearly need witnesses. And if the witnesses aren't properly supported, they're not going to feel safe to come forward and give the evidence that the police need.
It's happening all around us, but few of us see it. People brought from abroad and sold as slaves, their perpetrators controlling what they do, when they eat and when they sleep. But it's also British people who are being enslaved. An investigation by ITV News revealed the scale of British children exploited and forced around the country to sell drugs. The anti-slavery report, published this morning, made little mention of this homegrown problem.
Do you think that you, as the Commissioner, need to be looking into what's going on with British kids being pushed around the country?
I totally agree that I need to look at that issue. And again, you know, this is criminals, organised criminality. Whilst everybody's just pushing it over the county lines and not accepting responsibility, or whilst everybody's looking at those victims as just somebody who isn't entitled to support, so they should be a #1 priority for policing.
And are they?
I don't think they are, no.
Tonight, the Prime Minister and royals gathered to commemorate the work of William Wilberforce, the British politician world famous for bringing an end to the slave trade in the 19th century. His legacy lives on, but 200 years later, to finally banish slavery, real progress is going to require a step change from the police. Allegra Stratton, News at 10.
And amongst the guests for that service, or at that service for William Wilberforce this evening, was the head of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, Cardinal Vincent Nichols. He's set up a joint clergy and police group to tackle human trafficking. In a fortnight, he'll head out to Rome for an international conference hosted by the Pope. And a little earlier this evening, I asked him why he took up this cause.
Well, it started by listening to a number of victims. A few years ago, an English girl came to speak to our bishops, said how she'd been trafficked from this country to Italy and into enforced prostitution for quite a number of years. So while many people might think, quite rightly, that there's a predominance in human trafficking today from places like Romania or from Nigeria, there are also people from this country who have suffered.
So it's deeply depressing, I'm sure we'd all agree in this day and age, that this is happening, and happening frankly on the scale that it is. The government says it wants to do something about it. But let's be honest, this report is by the Anti-Slavery Commission is pretty damning in a lot of ways.
I think we're just at the beginning, frankly. I think we're all just at the beginning. Human trafficking is a vast international evil network. Therefore, we have to put other international networks against it, and the churches have that capacity.
Isn't this a good moment to be saying to the government, frankly, you're going to have to spend some more money on this?
I'm sure the Prime Minister knows that very clearly, and I would expect on an event like this evening that she'll be talking about a greater effort and a very, very strong commitment. But I think we all have to be much more aware. We have to be aware when people are washing our cars or when we're going to all sorts of different services, quite apart from probably the most common, which is prostitution. But where is the economic sense of how this particular person or these people are working?
You've worked very closely with the new Prime Minister. I know you know her very well. Is the message to her, look, you need to do more? And if that is your message, do you think it's one presumably that you imagine she'll be receptive to?
I do think she'll be quite determined this evening to show her own vigour in this area. I do believe she is personally deeply committed to this, and she knows that she has got the support of a lot of people like myself, like Pope Francis, like people around the world to help in this global problem.
Cardinal Vincent Nichols talking to me just a short time ago. Now, it hasn't yet reached anything like the intensity of Syria, but the airstrikes in the skies over Yemen are having a devastating effect on civilians on the ground. A Saudi-led coalition claims to be targeting Yemen's anti-government rebels, the Houthis, but those airstrikes seem to focus on the kind of buildings that are, to be honest, essential for everyday life. There have been 58 strikes on hospitals, 253 on schools, and more than 1,000 on other infrastructure targets like power stations, shops and marketplaces, all of which is very uncomfortable for us because we as a country supply very large amounts of weapons to the Saudis.
In Yemen's war, civilians and the infrastructure they rely on are under attack. Hospitals, schools, markets, power stations, all targets. It seems the rules of war mean nothing here. One night, 3 weeks ago, this school was hit in an airstrike. The children are determined to hold on to what little they have. They live nearby and thought they were going to die. Mohammed and Yusuf tell me what happened. It was horrible. We were very scared and ran away. I'm so upset. We really want to study, but they destroyed our school. As we travel across Yemen, the airstrikes continue.
Yeah. Is there another one? Another one.
Mohammed Abdo worked as a volunteer nurse at a hospital until it was hit. He was busy saving lives when the bomb fell. I didn't expect they would hit the hospital. We felt secure. There was shrapnel flying everywhere. I can't sleep now because of the trauma. This is what remains of Ab's hospital where he worked. Run by the charity MSF, more than 150,000 people relied on it. But the Saudi-led coalition airstrike changed everything. 19 people were killed in the bombing. The hospital's coordinator describes the horror of that day.
It was quite terrifying. We had a crater of around 2 meters deep in the middle of the hospital, the place where everybody passes, the emergency room and the general consultation area was mostly destroyed. There were body parts everywhere, there were dead people, burnt people.
What happened here wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a wider picture where civilians are being targeted in this war. Last year, Britain sold Saudi Arabia more than £3 billion worth of weapons, including £1 billion of bombs and missiles. That's why the way this war is being conducted matters. The Saudis say they do not deliberately target civilians. They accuse Houthi fighters of hiding in populated areas. Saleh al-Bakri shows me what the airstrikes did to this market. He says those who lived here were forced to flee. What happened here is an injustice. We are civilians. 9 people were killed in this street alone. The majority of civilians who've died have been killed in airstrikes. There's no escape for those caught in the middle. No one here feels safe. Neil Connery, News at 10, Yemen.
And tomorrow, Neil will be reporting on another sign that Yemen is on the point of collapse. There is a real threat of starvation amongst its children. Around 90% of Yemen's food comes from abroad, so blockades and the collapse in the currency means supplies are running short. Over in America, it looks as though Trump Unleashed is not having quite the impact he hoped. Last night, after his party hierarchy more or less gave up on him, he pronounced himself unshackled. It may take a while to see what he means by that, although we can probably guess, but so far its only impact has been to make Hillary seem like the odds-on favourite for the White House.
Mr. Donald J. Trump!
The great maverick is now openly proclaiming that the shackles are off, that he can run against Democratic and Republican leaders alike. Trump is a populist candidate now attacking his own party and the Republican Speaker Paul Ryan for failing to see what he calls his triumph in the debate.
So, you know, you think that they'd say, great going, Don, let's go, let's beat this crook. She's a crook, let's beat her, we got to stop it. No, he doesn't do that.
At the same time, his top surrogates are laughing off Trump's more offensive and outrageous comments.
You need a strong man, you need an independent man, you need a man who tells it straight. Sometimes really straight. But boy, it's a heck of a lot better than being a liar.
Certainly his core supporters are buying into the message that an assault on both parties, on the system itself, is needed.
It is really more about just bringing things back to the people because we feel like we are being cheated and robbed.
He has started an American revolution, and it'll show whether he wins or not.
Election day may be a month away, but people are already casting their ballots. This is the first day of early voting in the key state of Ohio. The state is clearly in play for both candidates, and to spend time here is to realize the level of frustration with Washington that is motivating voters. Chad Jones works in a motorbike factory in Ohio, and he thinks Trump can still win, and that the pollsters are misjudging the mood here.
A lot of people are going to go in that voting booth, they're going to pull that curtain close, and they're going to push that angry button. They're going to push that button for Trump as, like, I'm just sick and tired of it. And they're going to vote for Trump.
Our next president faces daunting challenges in a dangerous world.
Trump's most recent TV ads are pushing the boundaries of good taste, exploiting Mrs. Clinton's recent bout of pneumonia.
Hillary Clinton doesn't have the fortitude, strength, or stamina to lead in our world.
Donald Trump certainly appears to be outside of the control of his handlers and strategists. That is thrilling his political base, but it makes it increasingly unlikely he will win this tumultuous presidential race. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
The odds of Mr. Trump winning do seem to be lengthening a bit tonight. This map is based on the latest opinion poll results, and it does show the states almost exactly evenly split between Trump and Clinton. But the president is chosen, of course, by electoral college votes. Win the state and you get all its votes, the precise number determined by the population of that state. 270 electoral college votes are needed to win, and this latest Washington Post estimate puts Clinton far ahead, with 341 to 197. Barring hanging charts, we should know the real result 4 weeks today. We'll be covering that in a special programme overnight, but with politics the way it is, predictions are always dangerous. Let's return now to Washington and Robert Moore. Robert, as I said, prediction is always dangerous, but is it game over for Trump in your view?
Oh, Tom, look, we've got 4 weeks to go of the most unpredictable, unconventional, frankly, bizarre campaign any of us have ever seen. And so there's plenty of scope left for more twists and more surprises. But I think we can say this: American politics is often called a game of addition and multiplication of those rules. His sole motivation, his sole focus appears to be trying to excite his base and trying to provoke political elites and the establishment. So most political analysts simply believe there is no way for him to get to the White House at this stage. In other words, there aren't just enough angry white voters to get him to win the presidency. So you'd have to say, and the polls that you have been citing there reflect this, that his campaign is in deepening trouble. And unless he shows a bit more discipline, it is potentially coming off the rails altogether.
Robert, thank you very much indeed. A lot of fuss was made recently about 2 England cricketers not prepared to tour Bangladesh for safety reasons. Well, today, those that did travel gave us reason to cheer.
Up and over. Will it go all the way?
It does. What a way to win a match.
A stylish six from Chris Wokes saw England overtake a target of 278 to win in Chittagong with 4 wickets to spare. They clinched the one-day international series by 2 matches to 1. And finally, when a young horse called Mrs. Danvers was put up for auction back in February, you could have been forgiven for asking why the long face. The answer, no one wanted to pay her owners the paltry £1,000 asking price. Fast forward to last weekend and Mrs. Danvers won her 5th race on the trot, so to speak, and in the process has amassed almost £200,000 in prize money. What's changed? Well, a dedicated trainer who spotted signs of potential, it seems.
A perfect 5 out of 5. Mrs. Danvers wins the Cornwallis.
This is the story of the horse no one wanted, who's now worth £500,000. Her name is Mrs. Danvers, and she cost her owners nothing. Mark Burton is a joiner, and his wife Connie is a hospital administrator.
We're not multi-millionaires, we live in a 2 up, 2 down. We're still paying for it. It's a lovely story for all little people that are trying to breed 1 or 2 like we have. It's a lovely story that you can get there, you know, if you're lucky, and we've had a lot of luck.
Back in February, the horse was up for sale for just £1,000. There were no bids. Since then, she's won 5 races out of 5 and earned just under £200,000 in prize money. She's now estimated to be worth £500,000, which could come in handy to the Burtons.
Of course, everyone could do with the money, can't they?
Pay off your mortgage?
Yeah, it would be nice. We put everything into our horses, so but I don't think at this present time we'd be tempted to sell her.
Really?
No.
Even for that much?
No.
So the moral of the story is you don't need to be a multi-millionaire to win in this game.
People out there need to realise that it is possible if you pick the right trainer and the right horse.
And you're the right trainer.
I'm definitely the right trainer. And all my horses think that, and some of my owners.
It's an uplifting tale which really has defied all the odds. Ian Payne, News at 10, Hampshire.
Great story. I'm not sure every owner sees it that way, but there we are. Just time for a quick look at what is showing up on the news radar for tomorrow. Boris Johnson will be answering MPs' questions at the Foreign Affairs Committee on the government's foreign policy. No doubt Syria will feature prominently. Nicola Sturgeon kicks off the Scottish National Party conference with her leader's speech. The party is also expected to announce a new deputy leader, and a news conference will be held about the case of the British mother, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who's been held in prison in Iran for more than 3 months without explanation, it must be said. I'll be here again tomorrow night, but for now, good night, and thank you very much for watching.